Oscar Levant, the famed jazz pianist, wrote an autobiography late in his life which he entitled My Life or the Story of George Gershwin. I could easily translate that into My Life or the Story of Phyllis Curtin. I might have had the same career as an opera composer that I have had if I had never known Phyllis, but it's highly unlikely. She was that formative a figure in my early musical life from the time I was 26 years old. How I came to know Phyllis and how she managed to get Susanna initially performed in New York City will reveal more about this generous lady than anything else I could say. In the summer of 1954, I drove my car from Florida out to the Aspen Festival with a handwritten manuscript of Susanna and the improbable possibility that Phyllis Curtin, who was teaching and performing at that summer festival, would agree to perform it. I had heard of her recent success at the New York City Opera as Salome, which had garnered her photo coverage in Life magazine. Mind you, I didn't even write her in advance, but upon getting into Aspen, I called her, and to my surprise, she invited me to come over that same afternoon. When I think about it now, this seems like pure fiction. So I went to her house, and she greeted me very warmly and seemed eager to hear this new opera. I verbally gave her an outline of the story, and she was immediately responsive and wanted to hear the music. After I played her the two Susanna arias, she told me of an incident at a church in her hometown where a local minister had publicly disapproved from the pulpit of the fact that she had been performing Salome in New York. I suggested playing through the rest of the opera, but she said she had heard enough, that she wanted to do it, and remarkably, she had the dates of the Tallahassee premiere in February of 1955 open. She immediately called Mac Harrell, who was also in Aspen and a leading bass baritone at that time, and told him he should hear the evangelist role of Blitch. He was interested and amazingly was also available on the premiere dates. The end results of that afternoon in Aspen were that both singers came to Tallahassee and the Florida State University, where I taught at the time, and performed at the premiere. After that, Phyllis arranged for me to see a publisher in New York, which ultimately led to the New York City Opera and the professional premiere there in the fall of 1956. There were roughly 18 months between the FSU and New York performances, during which Phyllis and I played the opera for other possible producers. During those occasions, Phyllis would sing all of the female roles, as well as the chorus. I was constantly impressed with her selflessness and total absence of divadom. In the years following, I wrote 3 other operas in which Phyllis had the leading soprano roles. I also wrote a monodrama for her based on the life of Eleanor of Aquitaine, who was her most admired historical heroine. Phyllis was a consummate musician, which came in part from her study of the violin as a young girl. She was the most skillful sight reader by far of the singers I have known in my life, and had an acute ear for pitch. She was admired in particular by conductors, in which these factors were very important, and a large part of her performing life was done with orchestras as well as opera. I will never forget her extraordinary facility at sight reading and memorizing music. For the premiere of Susanna, she arrived on a Wednesday. On Thursday, we met in my studio and went through the role for the first time, with me playing the orchestra part. It was the first time she had heard the orchestra. She had learned the entire voice part by herself. By Saturday, she performed the entire role from memory. As most of you here can attest to, Phyllis was a woman of high intelligence and wide interests. She was also a woman of uncommon physical beauty. And with all of this, she remained a woman of appropriate humility. I can happily say that we remained dear friends to the end, occasionally in person, more frequently by phone. I shall miss calling her and waiting for that inimitable voice to answer as she always did. Carlisle. Rest in peace, dear friend.